Thank you very much, colleagues. I'm sorry that we've been a little slow in joining you. Two problems. One was managing to get ourselves onto the meeting, but the other is we've sprung a leak in our house and we've had to send for a plumber. So it hasn't been a very straightforward entry to the meeting. But let me begin by welcoming all of you to the second online meeting of the Political Committee. I trust you all had a decent break during the summer, as much as is possible in these unusual times. Today, we will consider two of our committee's 4 draft reports, and I'm very pleased to see so many of you here for this meeting to deliberate on these documents. I would like, therefore, to call the meeting to order and to declare the meeting open. Having done so, let me begin with some practical information. We will do our very best to keep this meeting to under 2 hours. I will therefore structure the meeting in the following way. After the presentation of each of the draft reports, we will ask for comments or questions, and I will ask the rapporteurs not to answer the questions or respond to the comments individually, but to group them all together. And once the comment or suggestion is completed in relation to one report, we will ask the rapporteur to respond. And we will follow exactly the same pattern in relation to the second report. Report first, followed by questions or comments. And when these have been completed, the rapporteur will then follow by responding to all of them. If you would like to take the floor during or following the presentations of the reports, please click on the Request to Speak button and you will be added to our list. You can do this at any time. Should you have any technical difficulties, please make use of the chat box where our committee coordinator, Karen Walker-Love, will provide assistance. And you should also note that the meeting will be recorded for communication purposes in our publications, on our website, and on our social media channels. Please contact the committee director if you or any member of your delegation has any concerns or if any member wishes to be exempted from this activity. With these preliminary remarks, let me pass now to item 2 on the agenda, namely the adoption of the draft agenda. May I ask the committee to accept that we should take up this agenda for the purpose of these proceedings? Are there any comments or objections? In the absence of comments or objections, the draft agenda is adopted. Colleagues, our first draft report is the draft report of the Subcommittee on NATO Partnerships, entitled The NATO-EU Partnership in a Changing Global Context, which I'm delighted to welcome Sonia Crimi of France as rapporteur to present her draft report. Sonia, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, mes chers.
Thank you very much, Chairman, dear colleagues. It's with great pleasure and also with some emotion that I will be presenting for the first time a draft report for the Partnerships Subcommittee. So this is the report on the NATO-EU partnership in a changing global context. Of course, it is unfortunate that circumstances mean that we have to meet online rather than in person, but I'm sure that our discussions on this recurring and always re-emerging topic will nevertheless be constructive and detailed. Firstly, I would like to thank everyone who has been working to ensure that these meetings can continue in the current context. I would like to thank everyone who's been involved in drafting the report. The speaker kindly thanks the interpreters as well as everyone involved in logistical support. NATO and the EU are two unique organizations. Clearly, they are of a different nature, but they emerged from the same goal in the aftermath of the Second World War, namely ensuring peace and prosperity on the European continent. These two organizations are linked by a common European destiny and are underpinned by the same heritage of democracy, individual freedom, and human rights. The two organizations have 21 members in common currently. The two organizations are often present in the same theaters and in the same regions across the world. Thus, NATO and the EU are natural partners. The security is inextricably linked. Their cooperation was for a long time informal and ad hoc, but has strengthened significantly since signing the joint declaration in 2016. These two organizations have become aware that neither possesses alone the full range of capability, expertise, and tools which are necessary in order to provide comprehensive solutions to the very complex and multifaceted security challenges that we're facing across the globe. The coronavirus pandemic, dear colleagues, is the perfect example of this. It shows how important this cooperation is and shows why we should strengthen it, because both over the short and long term, NATO and the EU will be facing common shared issues in the security sphere. The emergence or re-emergence of certain threats and challenges such as climate change, hybrid threats, artificial intelligence, great power competition, as well as instability in the south, among others. There's also the potential impact of this COVID crisis on defense spending in member states, and so on. Therefore, we need more cooperation in order to overcome these challenges. The draft report takes stock of what has been achieved in cooperation between NATO and the EU. And what has been achieved is indeed remarkable. And that covers all 7 areas that were identified in the 2016 joint declaration. But I think we should not rest on our laurels, despite the significant progress. I think that we can also identify the thorny issues which are impacting a full implementation of this very strategic partnership, and we need to do so in order to be able to develop recommendations in order for us to go further in that cooperation. That is the role of our Assembly, dear colleagues, and that is very much part of this forward-looking thought process, NATO 2030, which was launched in London last December and which is currently being implemented by NATO's Secretary General. My first point is that there has been tangible progress since 2016. It's important to point that out. The Wales Summit Declaration in 2014, the Warsaw Summit Declaration in 2016, joint statements and declarations, joint projects and meetings, as well as an unprecedented level of coordination of activities between the two organizations, as well as an exchange of information, all characterize the relationship between NATO and the EU. Cooperation has made regular and substantial progress. This cooperation continues to deepen and to broaden into new fields of joint interest. For example, there's crisis management, support to peace and international security, but also the issue of defense capability development when there's an overlap in requirements between the two organizations, and always in full cooperation with member states and in their interests. The draft report provides a number of examples of this cooperation between the EU and NATO faced with these new challenges, and I would provide you with 4 examples. Firstly, the fight against terrorism. That's a field where the two organizations can work particularly well together. They're complementary in terms of fighting against the proliferation of weapons, ensuring maritime security. There's cybersecurity and capability building for partners, etc. Second example, hybrid threats. In particular, fighting against disinformation and cyber threats. We can talk about that more in a moment. Thirdly, there's military mobility, which has become one of the main areas of cooperation between NATO and the EU. The EU is particularly well situated for a leadership role in that particular field because NATO only has a very limited capability to start cross-border infrastructure projects or in negotiating border-free areas. And so paragraph 25 of my report will be modified in order to take into account decisions taken by the European Council last July to that effect. Fourth example, effective maritime cooperation, notably in the Mediterranean, with support being provided to the NATO Sea Garden operation and the EU's Sophia operation in the central Mediterranean. Discussions are currently underway in terms of extending support to the Irini operation, which has replaced Sophia. Currently, NATO has day-to-day contact with the EU, and that is no longer in any way unusual or surprising. In addition to staff-to-staff contacts, the two organizations continue to work in a parallel fashion, coordinating their efforts and in a complementary fashion. Managing the COVID-19 crisis is an excellent example of that. There was medical support in order to provide relief to civilian health workers, logistic support, and fighting against disinformation. All of this shows the enormous added value of coordinating efforts between the EU and NATO. Just as the excellent initiative of our Assembly to have an in-depth analysis of the impact of this pandemic on all fields covered by committees has shown as well. Nevertheless, this strategic partnership, I think, can only fully play its role if and when we provide a real answer to the twofold question of both mutual concerns in both organizations and, secondly, an institutional shortcoming. With changes in the Euro-Atlantic community, there are trends that are pulling apart some of our members, and there's also European efforts in terms of defense and security. There are a number of concerns regarding all of this. There are concerns that these trends and initiatives harbor a threefold risk in terms of decoupling, duplication, and discrimination. The partners of the European nations have repeated it many times, and I think the Europeans are now aware. They must do more for their own security and defense. The EU's defense initiatives were designed to allow Europe to better face threats, and in doing so it cooperates with NATO in the interests of both the EU and NATO in order to allow for contributing to better burden sharing. A European pillar comprised of a stronger EU with a more effective CSDP, Common Security and Defense Policy, will contribute to a stronger NATO to ensure collective defense and deterrence in Europe. Europe's ambitions in terms of modernizing its armed forces are complementary to capability development efforts in NATO. Significant progress has been made in order to increase synergies, notably in terms of capabilities and avoiding unnecessary duplication between NATO and EU. Of course, coordination can always improve, especially since NATO and EU are not the only stakeholders. There's a wide range of bilateral and multilateral cooperation and initiatives in defense policy in Europe. The EU-NATO partnership, of course, has to take into account a number of things, and this is extremely important, colleagues. The NATO-EU partnership must take into account the security and defense policies of the 6 EU members who are not NATO members, as well as the 8 non-EU NATO members. Deepened dialogue between these two organizations is the best way of avoiding the danger of the 3 Ds that I mentioned earlier. Discussions on how to take into account the concerns of non-European allies, in particular the English-speaking non-EU allies, are currently underway in order to combine both issues. Namely, the Europeans must do more to increase their defense capability, and secondly, The allies that I mentioned earlier must be able to participate in all of this in following clear rules. And one of the important issues at stake in the negotiations underway between the EU and the UK is maintaining a strong bond between the UK and European defence policy. That being said, it's important to remind that the proposed budget for the European Defence Fund, EDF, is only approximately 7 billion euros for the 2021 to 2027 period. The final version of my draft report will be modified, notably in its paragraph 48, in order to compare that amount with the military budgets of main NATO members. So I think that the main issue here is ensuring that we uphold the three commitments that we made in 2014, namely cash, capabilities, and operational contributions, the three Cs. There is also an institutional difficulty due to the dispute between Turkey, a major NATO member, and Cyprus. Meetings between high representatives between the two organizations since 2004 have been limited to informal discussions with no classified information being exchanged, which is a major hindrance to dialogue between NATO and the EU. It's a major hindrance to their cooperation, notably when it comes to cybersecurity. The NATO-EU partnership, of course, will continue to make progress on the basis of these informal meetings, staff exchanges, and ad hoc practical operational cooperation. The NATO-EU partnership can therefore serve as a forum for discussion on challenges and opportunities in terms of Euro-Atlantic security. For example, be it in terms of China or artificial intelligence. However, having a formalized NATO-EU relationship would allow us to further deepen this strategic partnership between the two organizations as developed in the Brussels Summit Declaration in 2018. And the speaker quotes, "We will continue to strengthen our strategic partnership in a spirit of total openness, transparency, and mutual complementarity, while respecting the different mandates, decision-making autonomy, and the institutional integrity of NATO and the EU as decided by the two organizations." To conclude, dear colleagues, the response to the COVID-19 pandemic shows that NATO's and the EU's resources converge, and there is significant added value in coordinating the measures and efforts made between the two partners to ensure Europe's security and defense. There's a sense of belonging to one community, and that sense of belonging will continue to be strengthened by regularly held meetings, through joint declarations and communiques, joint training programs and projects. But maintaining the highest level political dialogue is also necessary, notably when it comes to the lack of official relations between the two organizations and its cause, namely the dispute between Cyprus and Turkey, which illustrates in a broader sense the rather complex relationship between this important ally, between that important ally and other members of NATO, as well as with the EU. It's important to discuss this. The alliance's current strategic thinking and the upcoming strategic review of PESCO are a significant opportunity for our governments. Our governments should take advantage of that opportunity in order to bring forward this essential partnership. I think we're well aware of what the path is ahead of us. We need to ensure that we have true political dialogue, regularly occurring open political dialogue, a dialogue that touches on sensitive issues, and when these two organizations get together, it's about supporting values which are greater than just the smallest common denominator. It's supporting democracy, human rights, the rule of law. These are the international rules which bind the Euro-Atlantic community. So we must together find a new consensus on shared political goals and on the strategy to be adopted to reach those goals by working together in facing those who are trying to undermine our declared values.
De l'OTAN doivent être prêts à jouer leur rôle à cet égard et nous le sommes. Notre Assemblée nous offre.
Our Assembly has always enabled us to have frank and open dialogue on strategic topics for the Alliance. The International Secretariat has been providing essential assistance to us for this, so I'd like to conclude these statements by underscoring the excellent assistance that they have provided to us in drafting this document. Thank you very much, friends. Thank you very much. We are just waiting for the chairman, who has had some difficulties in connecting. Andres?
Was again trying to get in touch with our chairman, but yes, apparently technical problems persist. Perhaps maybe I could ask one of our committee officers to temporarily take over. I don't know if Congressman Connolly could temporarily come on screen and conduct the Q&A session, or Mr. Oyers-Kalnins.
Mr. Kalnins he has already requested the floor to ask a question, so maybe if he doesn't mind, we can put him on, we can give him the floor, and then, Yes. Just for you to know, we've got 4 requests for the floor in total, including Mr. Kalnins, actually 5 requests now. So I guess in line with the recommendation from the chair, maybe we can take all requests. We've got a 6th one now. We can take all requests before we get an answer from the rapporteur, if you agree, Mr. Kalnins.
That's fine with me. Now, should I go? Can I start with my question, or since I'm
absolutely
chairing or moderating now?
We can start with your question, and then we'll move to the next one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Sonia for what I think is a very good, very comprehensive report. I think you cover all the key issues that we're dealing with, both challenges and opportunities for NATO and the EU. And I really appreciate the emphasis you put on military mobility, and I'm intrigued by the suggestion in the report about having the high rep from the EU be an observer in NATO planning sessions. So I think that's something worth discussing. I just want to bring up 2 issues. One is on paragraph 36. If we could look at that, I just have some concerns about the last sentence of paragraph 36, which reads, in some ways, Europe's increasing military weight could benefit the United States by freeing up American resources for activities in the Asia-Pacific region. I don't know if we have a justification to say that. I don't even know if that's what our American colleagues really have in mind. Perhaps Jerry Connolly or somebody else in the U.S. delegation would respond, but I don't think we as NATO parliamentarians should be encouraging a reduction of U.S. presence in Europe for whatever reason. So I just don't think that line is necessarily justified in this. And the second concern would be paragraph 44. And here again, it's the last sentence in the paragraph. And I'll read it. Additionally, some European countries may find it more preferable politically to increase their defense investment through these EU channels rather than NATO. And here again, whether this is or is not true, I don't know if we as NATO parliamentarians should be endorsing or even encouraging the idea of preferring EU over NATO. I just think that's a little bit questionable, and I would prefer not to see that statement in here. So otherwise, I think the report is excellent, and there are so many other issues we will have to deal with, especially in the coming years. So thank you very much, Sonia, for an outstanding job. Thank you.
So, Mr. Kalnins, then, as interim president or chair, we now have a request for Mr. Ildiz from Turkey. So we can give him the floor.
Okay.
If you
Well then, very much so to Mr. Yildiz of Turkey. Please take the floor.
Okay. Greetings from Ankara. I thank Sonia for the comprehensive report, but unfortunately I disagree with the essence of the report. Let me explain why. We are NATO-PA, of course, but this report in essence looks like an European Parliament report. Our job is to spare NATO from challenges or from unnecessary burdens. I partly disagree with the judgment that since 2016 we made improvement in NATO-EU relations. Yes, we did some tactical achievements thanks to the Turkish flexibility every time. But indeed, in the essence of the problems, we got worse. For two reasons. One was the Greek Cypriot membership in the EU. And second is the non-fulfillment of EU promises to be inclusive for non-EU allies in the EU defense initiatives and operations. Let me give you an example. We discussed in the previous meeting the incident between Turkish and French naval ships in the Mediterranean. Imagine that one Turkish civil ship was checked 3 times in one day in the same waters by EU member naval ships. One was Greek, one was Italian, the last one was French. And some is working for NATO operation in the same waters, some is working for EU operation Irene. It was kind of harassment. And then at the end, what happened? Due to lack of these complications, miscoordination and duplication, these two naval ships, one is French, one is Turkish, in the same NATO operation. Turkish ship supplied this French ship the same day with fuel, with other things. But in a few hours, they came face to face due to lack of this coordination and duplication. Because of the insistence of EU not to include Turkey and other non-EU allies in these operations. Of course, that in the Aegean operation on migration, Turkey at that time, due to the urgency of the problem and humanitarian dimension, allowed some NATO assistance on this operation, but it is not NATO's job in essence. And in the essence of the issue, if these EU practices for years, for decades, are not trusted by Turkey, unfortunately. That's why in the report, I think it downplays, underestimates the challenges, the urgent challenges, but it overestimates the EU positions, which for me, a lot of them are wishful thinking. They are not commensurate, proper to the seriousness of the challenges. I don't have a concrete draft phrasing to address this problem, but I will try to make a few sentences in a few days and send it to the discretion of the reporter, Sonia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Collins, the next request is from Mr. Connolly. Can Can I give him the floor? Okay, so Mr. Connolly will give you the floor right now.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, all clear.
Okay. Sonia? Great report, thank you. Good job. Just 2 points. I wanted to echo what Ojar said. I think we, on number 36 there, we don't want to say anything that would seem to endorse any kind of American retrenchment in Europe. We want a robust U.S. presence as is welcome, and we want a robust U.S. Presence and support for NATO. And so I think Ojas is right that that could be misconstrued. And, we have an election in, I think, 68 days, and depending on the outcome of that, there could be a very strong, robust redoubling of U.S. commitment both to our presence in Europe and to NATO. So I just think we might want to rephrase that in such a way that that confusion is addressed. The second thing, my second and final observation, in the area of broadening cooperation to new areas, which is, I think, page number 51, at the bottom of number 1 under 51, we say the current COVID-19 pandemic reinforces the common interest since China's response to the health emergency encompasses a geopolitical dimension through its policy of generosity. You may recall that a month or so ago, I delivered a paper to this committee on China. And that paper was accepted, and we criticized in that paper China's initial response to COVID-19, not being forthcoming, not sharing information that contributed to confusion and the spread of the virus. So I would respectfully suggest we try to make the language, we add, if you want to quote the policy of generosity, which is the Chinese way of describing itself, I think we should add, although China has come in for widespread criticism of its early lack of candor and information sharing with respect to COVID-19. I think that would maybe take care of the problem, but I want to make sure that whatever we say here is consistent with what we said in the China paper about a month or so ago. And those are my only 2 observations, and I think it's a really good report, and thank you, Sonia, for your effort.
Okay, thank you, Jerry.
Mr. Collins? Yeah,
yes?
Go ahead.
Oh, I just see, I'm looking at the request list, and I see we have requests from Chris Peters to make a comment. Is Chris Peters available? There we go. Hello, is Chris Peters there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, let me introduce my position. I am Chris Peters, a member of the European Parliament, head of the Delegation of the European Parliament, also a member of the SEDE Commission and EFIT, and also, very interesting, I hope, shadow rapporteur for Turkey, also involving Iran, China, Libya, and Afghanistan. And I was till last year Deputy Prime Minister in Belgium. Now, first of all, congratulations, Sonia Krimi, for this report. I think it's a very important report. like you said, you must have an update because now in the European Parliament we are in discussion about the budget, certainly for the military mobility. It's very important to see what will be the end result of the budget in that field. Secondly, you know that the European Parliament have a sui generis position in your assembly, and I hope that we can enforce the relationship between the European Parliament and the Assembly, because for the moment this sui generis position is not very clear, or I think that we must work more together than is the case for the moment. Of course, we have some very important issues. You mentioned the strategic autonomy. That is very important discussion in the European Parliament. This is very important because we have a lot of issues now on our borders. We have, of course, Turkey and Greece. We have Libya. We have Sahel. We have a lot of issues to tackle, where the question is, what is the position of the European Union and the European Parliament, and what is the position of NATO, and of course also the political committee and the Parliamentary Assembly. You also mentioned PESCO and EDF. Also that is very important, and I can say that this discussion between European Union, European Parliament and some allies in NATO is a very important one, and we are open to have this discussion very transparent and with a lot of goodwill to find common ground to find the solutions. I'm a little bit disappointed about the reaction of our Turkish colleague. I shall, in my function as shadow rapporteur, also see what we can do to improve the relationship between European Union and Turkey, because I'm convinced that Turkey is a very important partner, not only in NATO, but also for the European Union. Thank you.
We seem to have lost Mr. Collins. In the meantime, we already have 3 requests. May I remind members that if you want to request the floor, you can click on the button that says request the floor at the bottom right corner of your screen. Maybe we can take the next speaker already. I'll just announce who the next 3 speakers are. First, we'll have Mr. Philippe Folio from France. Then we'll have Ms. Marietta Giannakou from Greece, and then Mr. Saturi from the European Parliament. So maybe Mr. Folio, if you we'll give you the floor right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. First and foremost, I would like to commend Sonia Krimi on the quality of this report and for the proposals that are highly relevant. And I'd like to reassure some of our colleagues, it is not a French Parliament report, it is a NATO Parliamentary Assembly report, so that we can best understand the challenges involving our Assembly. Now, I'm not going to go back over the observations, very legitimate ones that we've already heard from the previous speakers, but I'm thinking in particular about the caution we must exercise as regards the statements that we make regarding any decline in the U.S. presence in Europe. I would like to come back, however, to a variety of points that were addressed by Ahmet Yildiz. I think that it is an important point to be able to say what we think, and I fully respect his freedom of speech and expression. Having said that, there are a variety of things that he emphasized that I do not think are in line with reality. Now, there may be some difficulties in coordination at times between the EU and NATO, it does not mean necessarily that this is rising and to a level that is any higher than it has been. Second of all, if at a given point in time, Turkey, and we regret it, has chosen to put some distance between itself and the EU and the values promoted by the EU, then once again, we cannot accept that they incriminate the EU for this situation. I think this is a reminder we should bear in mind. And I've had the opportunity to speak about the recent incidents that have occurred in the Eastern Mediterranean that are posing some problems. It's true for the European Union because Greece is a member of the EU, and also for NATO because Turkey, just like Greece, is a member of the Atlantic Alliance as well. And so we need to be able to say things. And I have had the opportunity to state this at a Bureau meeting, but I believe that at the upcoming sessions, we need to make sure that these issues are an item on the agenda regarding everything that is happening in the Eastern Mediterranean, because this is weakening the alliance, the EU indirectly, and I believe that it is important for everything that is related to compliance with international conventions, and that this be taken into account by everyone, including by all of the allies of the alliance. Because here we are touching upon something that in the medium term can be quite difficult, quite problematic for our alliance. I believe that this is a very important issue and essential for the future. Having said this, I would like to commend Sonia Crimi for the quality of her report, and I believe that this report is highly relevant, and it is a way for us to be able to look at these issues, taking into account this very important coordination between the EU and NATO. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell, welcome back. I see that you're back on your phone.
Yeah, indeed I am. And I believe Oyas has left us, but has come back. Why doesn't he just finish on this since he started it? I'll take over once we've...
It seems that we actually had a technical problem with Oyas as well. So I would, if you do not mind, I would rather go sure. With you. We've got, just to maybe bring you up to speed on this, we've got now 4 requests for the floor, and the next request is by Miss Giannakou from Greece. Can we give her the floor?
Yes, of course. I'll just say I blame the Russians for all of this.
Okay.
Is there a problem? Does she know?
Let's see. Let's just wait a few seconds. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time before the microphone turns itself on. Okay, it seems that we are indeed... no, sorry. There we go.
Yes, yes, we got it.
C'est ce que j'avais noté, c'est que les rapports du Parlement européen sont les meilleurs et les plus objectifs.
Would like to say is that reports from the European Parliament are the best and they're more objective. Political reports, I mean. It is clear that after the declarations of 2016 and 2018, the relations between NATO and the EU lost its impetus. Mrs. Crimi said, because Turkey doesn't know all the EU countries, and at the same time, Turkey wants to take advantage of EU defense programs and wants to take advantage of other EU programs. If Turkey wants to be part of the alliance, and in touch with the EU, then Turkey has to show some respect. That's what is going on in the Mediterranean, in the East, in the Eastern Mediterranean. I'm not going to say much, but it doesn't make sense to have a country like Turkey that is now threatening Greece. Sonia, your report is not only excellent, it is very clear regarding the problems we're experiencing now in the region. That's what I want to say as a Greek citizen. This behavior on the part of Turkey won't fly. Greece has been a member of NATO since 1949. Since 1981, Greece has been a member of the EU. Greece is a country that shows respect for human rights, that values relations between allied countries. Greece is also a country that is located in a region that is key, and because of another player, that region will become very weak. And it's unacceptable. Thank you, Sonia.
The next request is by Mr. Sartori from the European Parliament. It seems that we're having a technical issue with Mr. Sartori. So maybe we can go to the next. Let's try again with Mr. Sartori.
Vous m'entendez? Très bien. D'abord, j'ai plaisir en tant que membre du...
Can you hear me? Thank you. It is my pleasure to take part in this meeting as a member of the Commission on Human Rights. I'd like to thank our reporter for the report and her presentation. And I'd like to talk about nuclear deterrence. You mentioned the nuclear capabilities in terms of nuclear deterrence. For you, it's one of the key elements of the alliance's credibility. For my political group, the Green, for us, nuclear weapons won't make NATO credible. For us, credibility means solidarity and a common vision. There has to be a consistent, there is a consistent vision when it comes to arms control. For nuclear weapons, I'd like to mention Open Skies Treaty, Eurostat, INF Treaty, the Global Action Plan. Then there is credibility in the sense of being able to ensure security of the citizens. And for us, having member states of the alliance with nuclear weapons is something irresponsible. If those weapons were to be used, that would be a major crime against the environment again and against humanity. The 122 countries that adopted the ban treaty in 2017, these countries do not consider the nuclear weapons as a source of stability. We want to reach a nuclear-free world, a world without nuclear weapons. That would be desirable that this assembly take part in this dynamics and look into account the commitments in terms of disarmament. It's Article 6 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. For NATO members that have nuclear weapons, I'd like to recall a norm that was adopted in May, that is the ban on nuclear test. There was a test that was carried out in Nevada. Tests that were carried out in the past still kill people. It is estimated that between 400,000 and 2 million people died because of nuclear tests. I'd like to renew the call of the European Parliament. I'd like to call on our American allies to ratify the treaty on the ban on nuclear tests. And I call on stopping the resumption of these tests. Thank you, esteemed colleagues.
The floor, you can click, or you should click on the button that says request to speak at the bottom right corner of your screen. We've got 3 more requests for the floor. We've got a request from Mr. Çonka from Turkey, from Mr. Ildiz from Turkey as well, and then from Mr. Navruzov from Azerbaijan. So we can give the floor to Mr. Çonka if you agree. Lord Campbell.
Yes, I'm agreeable to that.
Thank you very much for the floor. And I would like to thank Sonia for her report. It was really important to focus on important matters like NATO-EU cooperation in this time. Because as we see, the challenges that we are facing today are quite critical for all of our member countries. First of all, we need to make sure that we need to look at the Euro-Atlantic security from a broader perspective, including our southern flank and eastern flank and Mediterranean, Africa. All these issues are right now common challenges for all of us. So, especially European Union and some countries, especially inside the European Union, has to be very, very careful in determining their policies, especially the foreign policies. As to mention, I would like to mention that Turkey's position inside NATO or its relationship with the European Union has always been constructive, and we had contributions. This is our mindset as a country to make the region and our environment peaceful and trying to basically improve the situation. However, some countries' position, attitude, especially trying to exclude Turkey in Mediterranean issues, Eastern Mediterranean, Cyprus, these are issues very critical for Turkey. They are very strategic and very important matters for Turkey. And trying to exclude Turkey from the Mediterranean is actually very, very senseless. And so if we look at the situation, especially developing right now in Eastern Mediterranean, Turkey is basically defending its own rights, sovereignty rights, and this is well known by all experts, international legal experts. Turkey is not doing something out of its rights. However, some provocations or incitements by Greece or by France lately that we are experiencing are not in line with the spirit of our NATO alliance. We need to be very, very sensitive in this area, because if we join our hands together and if we work together, we can overcome the challenges and the problems that we are facing all together today. If some NATO member countries and especially some European Union countries try to form another kind of ground and try to exclude them, one of the most important members of NATO, Turkey, outside of their activities, this is going to create a big crack inside our alliance. So I would like to especially ask my friends, my parliamentarian friends from all NATO member countries to be fair and balanced in their analysis on what's going on and try to be constructive in their positions, as we are always open to solving issues with dialogue and with close cooperation with our colleagues. So today it's time to be fair, to be to understand each other, to have empathy for our friends and allies, not to be selfish. I think that's the most important thing to overcome our issues. And I hope we can improve this report, Sonia's report, with some more contributions from non-European Union member countries, so that we can bring a balance to this very important report. Thank you very much for the floor.
I'm content to have the two further contributions, but I would like to remind colleagues that we have another report, and a very important report that is too. And of course, Sonia has not yet had the chance to respond to the very considerable observations which have been made about the first report. So, as I said earlier, I'm happy to have the next two. I think one is Mr. Yildiz himself, who has the second, as it happens, is the rapporteur of the second report, and someone else whose name I'm afraid I didn't get.
Sorry to interrupt. We actually have 4 requests for the floor.
This is an occasion on which we are dealing with 2 reports. I appreciate there are strong feelings about this matter, but if the issues have already been canvassed to a considerable extent, then I'm certainly willing to allow people, say, a minute or something of that kind. But if we're not careful, we'll go past the 4 o'clock deadline which we created for ourselves, and also we will fail to give proper consideration to the second report. So on that basis, if the 4 people who, first of all, the list is closed, I'm afraid now, and will the 4 people who are remaining to wish to comment, and I know that I've a pretty clear idea what they want to comment upon, will confine themselves to a minute or something of that kind, then we can proceed.
Well, I'm really happy to report that due probably to your announcement, we now have only 2 requests for the floor. One is from Mr. Yildiz from Turkey, and then we'll have Mr. Novruzov from Azerbaijan.
Right, very well. Well, Mr. Yildiz, we're in your hands both now and in relation to the second report. I'm sure you will do good justice to both of these occasions.
Of course, as we discussed in Brussels in the last General Assembly, I think that any subgroupings within the alliance will unavoidably harm the alliance. This is EU or others. I criticize the EU position here because the report is about the Turkey, NATO and EU. That's why I criticize it. Secondly, some colleagues forget that what triggered the tension in the Mediterranean was the insistence of Greek Cypriot administration to start unilateral drillings, in spite of all the warnings that they should either postpone it for after solution or to make it jointly with the Turkish Cypriot side. Turkey didn't start this tension. It was certainly Greek Cypriot side, and unfortunately, EU did nothing to stop them. On contrary, some of these EU members encouraged them. That's why we are. And this is one of the proofs that of my points of criticism I made a few minutes ago. It is a proof that. Thank you.
And finally, the last contribution before we ask our rapporteur to respond to the many observations that have been made about her report. Who is last?
This is Mr. Novruzov from Azerbaijan.
From Azerbaijan. Mr. Novruzov, please.
Qatar, İran, İran'da tabii yok. İran'da var.
We seem to be having a technical issue with Mr. Navruzov.
Well, in that case, yes. Well, in that case, I think we must proceed. If there's an opportunity to let him come in later, then we'll try and fix that. But I know that our rapporteur has been taking careful notes, and I'm sure she wants to respond to some of the observations. Sonia, back to you.
Merci beaucoup, mes chers collègues, mes chers.
Thank you very much, esteemed colleagues. It's a tremendous pleasure, and I hope we'll meet soon.
Rapport et qui résume un peu l'âme.
I would like to react to one of the comments, which is very important. Namely, there's this tension between, there's this tension within the partnership. The partnership has to take into account the security and defense policy of the 6 EU members that are not members of NATO, as well as the 8 NATO member states that are not in the EU. That's a sentence from my report. That's very important. It's a very difficult thing to do, and I think that the diversity of your comments following this report show that very well. So I'll try to give you a transparent answer to all of your comments and suggestions for modifications and improvements in order to try to provide as broad as possible a view within our Assembly, expressing the views of all the members of our Parliamentary Assembly. I would like to firstly reply to the heads of delegation. One of the key paragraphs in the report is paragraph 44. Of course, the approach here is one of partnership between NATO and the EU. We're facing similar challenges, of course. And the risk is that the crisis stemming from the pandemic could have an impact on defense spending. And in certain cases, that could make it, in fact, the pandemic could make it easier to justify maintaining military capabilities within the EU to strengthen NATO as well. We're all members of Parliament. We all know how difficult it is sometimes to justify budgets, to justify spending, which in some cases is invisible. It's not something that citizens see on a day-to-day basis. But of course, I remain open to any suggestions that you may have in terms of rewording this paragraph. Regarding paragraph 36, I'd like to reply to you, Chairman, and reply to Mr. Connolly at the same time regarding paragraph 36.
Stratégique et non pas, bien évidemment, au retrait américain. Donc, bien évidemment, si la formulation est maladroite, je suis d'accord toujours pour reformuler cette phrase qui peut, bien évidemment, être comprise comme un encouragement de retrait plutôt américain, ce qui n'est pas du tout le cas. D'une manière qui n'était pas, en tout cas, ce n'était pas mon intention première à la rédaction de ce passage. Je vous me permettez de faire un passage, je répondrai.
I would also like to
English seems to have been defective.
Oh.
Are we satisfied?
No,
I think it's been restored. Please go on.
Yes, so I'll make sure that I'm not speaking too fast. So to respond to Chris from the European Parliament, thank you for your comments as well. I drafted this report in June, and I will be updating it in order to respond to your comments regarding the budgetary discussions at the EU level for the final version. Of course, you will have the finalized version, and then you can check that final version to make any amendments or changes that you wish. But I commit to updating the reports regarding the financial and budgetary discussions. Now, regarding nuclear issues, because I'm from a nation that is a nuclear power, I see that our colleague from the European Parliament is here, and he made comments regarding the nuclear issue. I wish to remind you that the report itself doesn't really address the nuclear issue. There are other excellent reports within our Assembly that address that issue, and there are certainly other reports to come that can address the nuclear issue. So that nuclear issue is out of scope for this report, but as you well know, dear colleagues, I am from a country which is a nuclear power. For our colleague from the European Parliament, of course, nuclear weapons are not a solution, but they're a last resort to ensure our security. I understand that there are differences of opinion on that, and I respect that. This is also an issue of our vital interests. I won't go into the many examples where nuclear deterrence is necessary, and there are international treaties that exist in that respect. But thank you for expressing your viewpoint from the European Parliament. And it is, I think, by working together between our two bodies that we can continue the debate on this issue. I'll try to answer all of the questions and comments. I think there were still comments from Ahmed and Berat. Just a moment, please. Well, thank you very much, dear friends, for your comments. Ahmed and Berat. I understand your comments. They're necessary in a democracy and in the internal dialogue within our group. Your comments were frank. And that's something that I've continually said in my report. Sometimes getting the exact wording right was very difficult, and I tried to do my best to ensure a wide range of viewpoints. If Ahmed or others have any suggestions to make in terms of additions in order to provide different viewpoints, I'm open to that. The same goes for the Greek delegation, which also made comments. We are all allies, and I think that we can say things clearly and calmly, as we have done today. Ahmed and Berat, I think that there are complex causes to these issues. Berat made a call for equality and fairness. That's very important, and I think that we share that approach. We have to look at the tangible progress, the operational cooperation which exists, but there are also operational difficulties, and there's also an institutional shortcoming in this partnership. I think we all agree that we have to find a solution to this. So as I said, the causes behind this are complex, but we can take that into account, and I wanted to recall to you the institutional shortcoming in this partnership, which is not something that we will, it's not something that we can currently deal with adequately, but I think that comments regarding the drafting of this report will participate in trying to reach a solution. For Mr. Connolly, I've taken good note of your comments. There's an expression which needed to be in quotation marks, and the fact that this expression was in quotation marks, that's something that I think would be understood. This is something that you insisted on a month ago, so I thought that this would be understood because it was meant ironically. So I will rewrite that particular passage for the final version of the report. I'd like to thank Philippe Folliot for his comment and his participation in the discussion. Thanks to Marita from Greece. Thank you to her for her vision and her encouragement. And thank you to her for this call and having a space for dialogue, which is very significant. And I hope that through this report, I've been able to try, and in my comments now, I hope that I've provided a response to everyone who made comments and questions in this discussion, and I hope that all of this helps us participate in this broader space of discussion in order to try to find solutions in the future, find solutions to the problems that we're currently facing. Thank you all very much.
We're again having a technical difficulty with our chair, but I suppose we could now start with the presentation of the second report by Mr. Ildiz. So Mr. Ildiz, if you could request the floor, we can then move on to the next report. Thank you.
Again, Nathan.
Oh, good.
Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, security and stability in the Gulf and in the Middle East in general are of the utmost importance to Euro-Atlantic security. Instability in the region may have a snowball effect on security and stability of the Euro-Atlantic region, which is why I believe that allies cannot turn a blind eye to the current economic, political, and social crisis in the Gulf. The COVID-19 pandemic is exacerbating the volatile security landscape of the Gulf, but also has opened new opportunities, unfortunately, for China to insert itself in the region through increased economic and soft power influence. Additionally, the sudden drop in oil prices has significantly damaged many economies of the region, threatening a new wave of political and economic woes, which in turn may affect the Euro-Atlantic security. The emergence of the new challenges does not mean that the old ones have disappeared. The region continues to be haunted by the rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia and its allies, as well as tensions between Iran and the United States. Already before the COVID-19 crisis, we have seen some dangerous escalations in the region. Iran continues to seek to alter the fragile regional balance of power by supporting Shia militias, proxies in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Lebanon, building up its strategic military capabilities and leading the campaign against the presence of the United States in the Gulf. Conversely, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the largest military spender and the largest economy in the region, and the United Arab Emirates continue to view Iran as a threat to the regional order and to counter its influence from Yemen to Syria. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have also pushed for a more active role of the United States in the region. However, the alliance between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Emirates is not without tensions either, which we briefly discuss in my report. Over the past few years, tensions involving Iran have re-emerged, causing dangerous escalations in the region, including the attacks by Iran and its allies on oil tankers, an American drone allegedly flying over Iranian airspace, Saudi oil facilities, and on US assets in Iraq. The US responded with strikes that resulted in the killing of General Qasem Soleimani, head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Al-Quds Force. The US has also launched Operation Sentinel to ensure safe passage of ships throughout the Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. Earlier this month, political, diplomatic, and military tensions between Iran and the US have increased again. The new version of the report will reflect these new developments, including the issue of restoring sanctions on Iran that was raised by the United States. The fact that the Gulf Arab community remains split further complicates the regional security environment. Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt continue their blockade of Qatar due to its alleged support for the so-called Arab awakening. The so-called Arab Quartet continues to blockade Qatar's airspace despite the international mediation efforts and the recent ruling of the International Court of Justice. Instability in the region may also hinder NATO's current efforts to fight the return of Daesh/ISIL since 2004. NATO has been involved in countering this menace through defense capacity building in Iraq to help train Iraqi forces to counter ISIL. Should Iraq plummet into renewed political instability, efforts made by the global coalition to fight terrorism might be severely jeopardized. Instability in the Middle East has paved the way for Russia, unfortunately, to further its presence in the region by increasing its military support to the Assad regime in Syria. While Russia is not militarily involved in the Gulf, it still seeks to increase ties with Iran over Syria and to challenge US global influence. The conflict in Syria continues to divide the region for years. While Assad forces backed by Russia have managed to maintain a stronghold over large parts of the Syrian territory, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries are reluctant on what the next steps should look like. Some Gulf countries, such as Emirates, are exploring ways to find a modus vivendi with Damascus, while others, such as Qatar, remain strongly opposed to the Assad regime. The war in Yemen, which is now reaching its sixth year with no end in sight, is considered to the region's stability is considered the worst humanitarian crisis in the world and is proving detrimental, harmful to the region's stability given the high number of killed and displaced people. Moreover, terrorist organizations find safe havens across Yemen, exploiting the fragile security situation, the constant armed conflicts, and the failure of state institutions to meet the basic needs of the people. The extraordinary heterogeneity and competition among various political and security agendas in the Gulf is deeply entrenched in this conflict. Although conflicts continue to plague the region and tensions among great powers never seem to die down, it must also be noted that some mediation attempts have in fact taken place. For example, following the Houthi attack on Saudi oil facilities in 2019, the Emirates initiated talks with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard by sending a military delegation to Tehran. Furthermore, Saudi Arabia is making efforts to improve ties with Iraq. Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, the turmoil in the Gulf represents an obstacle for peace in the region in general and cannot be overlooked by allies, NATO allies. Allow me to conclude by making a few general observations on how we, the Euro-Atlantic community, could address these challenges, at least some of them. NATO should continue its effort to secure peace and stability in the region through enhanced cooperation, strengthened cooperation with Gulf countries. These efforts have been continuous over the past 25 years and were renewed in 2004 with signing of the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative, ICI, of which Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Emirates are part of. Through these partnerships, NATO offers a broad range of education, training, and consultation opportunities. We have seen that mutual understanding between NATO and these countries have improved dramatically. NATO also largely benefits from this cooperation as Gulf partners have participated in operations in Bosnia, Herzegovina, Libya, and Afghanistan. Allied countries should also make concerted effort to monitor the latest political developments unraveling in Iraq. Given the drop in oil prices and the repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic, Iraq may be on the verge of a serious political and economic crisis. Because of NATO's involvement in defense capacity mission to help Iraqi forces to counter ISIL Daesh, stability in the country is of the utmost importance. The last thing to be desired for the region is that Iraq is being rushed to a new conflictual, sectarian, and unstable structure. The alliance should also keep in mind that the US administration has voiced the request for further involvement of NATO in the wider Middle East. As a result, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg signaled that the alliance is examining the possibility to further upgrade its contribution to the stability in the Middle East, which is a good thing. NATO should focus on sharing expertise and building partnership with Gulf countries, while keeping in mind that its involvement in the Gulf should be carefully calibrated given the multifaceted sensitivities of the region. NATO should consider using the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative framework more intensively for regular high-level political dialogue between the Euro-Atlantic community and the participating GCC members. NATO should also consider setting up platforms for regular exchanges with non-ICI GCC members, namely Saudi Arabia and Oman. It is also in the best interest of the alliance to bear in mind that China is attempting to exert its influence in the region through its so-called mask diplomacy, through which it is aiding Gulf countries with medical equipment to counter the coronavirus pandemic. NATO and the allied countries should also make an effort to hold Gulf rulers accountable, at least to follow them, of the severe human rights violations when necessary. The lack of a strong reaction by the allies against at least some of them, against the murder of Jamal Khashoggi was subject to criticism worldwide and should be an incentive for allied countries to voice their disdain against such brutal acts. The poor human rights conditions in the UAE also should not be overlooked. Finally, the international community, especially our alliance, should focus on ending humanitarian crisis worldwide as the coronavirus pandemic is rendering this ever more catastrophic. It is now more than ever the time to set aside national interests to make way for renewed efforts to end deadly conflicts and work towards stability and peace. In conclusion, dear colleagues, I, together with NATO PAS Secretariat, especially Director Andrews, tried to make a compact report and a compact introduction, avoiding the details. I hope it will deserve your kind appreciation. Thanks for your attention. I am at your service to hear the comments and answer the questions. Thank you. By the way, Mr. Chairman, I feel obliged to inform this august body. I am elected as the chairperson of the Turkish delegation to the Council of Europe. I know some of our NATO members also in the Council of Europe. I will be happy to work with them there also. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ahmed. We have to congratulate you on two things. First of all, your recent election that you've just described, but also on the content and quality of this outstanding report. And can I take the opportunity, since I was temporarily unable to join the conversation, to thank Sonia similarly for the quality and presentation of her report. Now, colleagues, we were hoping to finish by 1600 hours, that's GMT British time. That's about 25 minutes away. What I'm going to suggest is we take as many contributions as we can. I hope people will be very short in their observations. And if unhappily we're unable to take everyone, then they are entitled, and we would encourage them to write to the director of the committee, Andreas, who will ensure that they are passed on to Ahmed himself and that proper consideration is given as to their impact upon the terms, the existing terms of the report. So on that basis, I don't yet have any indication of who has asked to speak. Nathan, are you in a position to say?
Yes, sir. We've got two requests for the floor for now. We've got one from Lord Anderson of Swansea from the UK and one from Ms. Giannakou from Greece. If other members wish to request the floor, please click the request the floor button on the at the bottom right corner of your screen. Thank you very much. So the next speaker is Lord Anderson of Swansea.
Just before you begin, Donald, let me say it's a great pleasure to welcome you back to the Assembly. Of course, you were the United Kingdom delegation leader on, I won't say a long time ago, but just a few years ago. It's good to have you back. Donald Anderson. Lord Anderson.
And to return to the Assembly after an absence of 15 years when I chaired the Socialist Group. Alas, because technical reasons, I couldn't get in the last debate, but I will hope to make a contribution later. Just a few observations. First, I think this is an excellent summary, perhaps a little, it could be a little rebalanced with a greater emphasis on NATO's role and less description of the problems in the region. As to the, I notice it is dated the 6th of August. Since that time, of course, one has had the Israeli UAE diplomatic relations establishment. Now that could be of great potential significance. I wonder to what extent other countries will follow, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Oman, Bahrain, etc. Certainly it is a great setback for the Palestinians, and we need to examine at some stage what effect this will have on the dynamics of the region. Next, of course, is the significance of the Iranian decision to allow limited inspection of its nuclear facilities, and we might have some examination of that. The final point I make is this, that paragraph 40 talks about the reconstruction of Syria. This is a mammoth task costing billions of dollars. The question is, who will pay? I have spoken to some officials in the UK who are wary about this, saying that Russia should not be allowed to get off the hook of repayment, since they have in fact caused so much of the damage. And when we come again to pledging, it'll be interesting to see how much the Gulf countries are prepared to pay and who else will be prepared, because clearly there is a major humanitarian case for the reconstruction, and hopefully it may indeed encourage many talented Syrians to return to their home country. Thank you, Ming.
So the next speaker is Ms. Giannakou from Greece.
Mr. Yildiz, I want to ask you, Turkey is inside the Syrian territory. On the other side, Turkey has good relations with Saudi Arabia and other small countries, and the Qatar. Instead to have an invasion of Turkey in Syria, why Turkey don't try to take initiatives and to talk with these countries? They have so many conflicts between them. Can you tell me, please?
Have we any other contributors at this stage?
Sir, we've got another request from, actually two more requests now. There's one from Lord Anderson of Swansea again. I'm not sure if that is actually on purpose or not. So maybe we can check that now. And then there's another request from Mr. Bak from Turkey.
Mr. Bak from Turkey, please.
Okay.
Yes. Hello from everybody. Best regards from Turkey. Thank you very much. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
yes, thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
I can hear also.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmet Yıldız, for your comprehensive reports concerning Gulf area. We see that you point out many issues in the region. Especially, I would like to put some comments on war in Yemen issue. Since the war in Yemen started, and we see some effects of Saudi Arabia and some operations by the Saudi-led cooperation. But I don't understand the situation, as you mentioned, one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. We are, especially children are facing. And we ask our colleagues, our allies to point out this issue, because what is happening in Yemen, especially for the children, because of they are dying because of starving, and this points another causing one of the worst cases, humanitarian issue. And secondly, you point out the issue of murdering Adnan Kaşıkçı, I mean Mr. Kaşıkçı, journalist, not Adnan. So we see this case has not investigated by the international society in deeply. We see that this issue should not be closed, and we will follow up this issue about the journalists. So thank you very much for your reports. And also I would like to make some points concerning Syria. In your report, as you know, Turkey has nearly 3.5, approximately 4 million refugees in Turkey, and what we are facing now through a pandemic and also the other issues, we we need more support from our allies and also our European Union countries. So thank you very much for your reports, and also I know that you have worked in Ministry of Foreign Affairs for a long time, so I see you put your expertise on this report, and thank you very much to your explanation and to your report. Thank you.
Nathan, is that it? Any more?
This is it. I don't have any other requests for the floor for now. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. In that case, we'll draw a close to that part of our proceedings and refer back to Ahmed to respond to the comments that have been made.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard very important comments and really positive suggestions and very fair questions. First, on the Israeli Emirates rapprochement, certainly I will reflect this in the final draft version of my report in next meeting. But of course, this issue is very important and is followed by everybody in the world. But still, I am not sure about its nature, what it covers, what does not. And we hear from the news that Jared Kushner is traveling to some other GCC countries to persuade them in the same direction. I agree with Lord Swansea. Certainly, it is a very bad development. It undermines the well-established parameters of the solution of Palestinian or Middle East peace problem. But unfortunately, we are following this for years from some of our allies. Certainly, we are close to Palestine, EU and Turkey, European countries. Then let's hope that it may not be one of the adventurous initiatives of the Emirates, because in recent years, Emirates unfortunately is behaving in a very strange way internationally, supporting some mercenaries. Unfortunately, this somehow establishing a new government in some parts of Yemen, a separatist government to divide Yemen. So I will be happy to insert it in the next version of the report when we get some clarity on it. Certainly, we should follow the Iranian decision to allow limited inspection. Recently, I saw the representative of the International Atomic Agency received by President Rouhani, but I was not still sure how to reflect it. Certainly, I will, if I get phrases from other colleagues, I will insert it, or I will insert it in a way that will reflect the common understanding of the allies. On paragraph 40, on the reconstruction of Syria, I should admit that there is a lot of uncertainty on this compared to the previous years. Dear colleagues, when in the previous years, when Turkey, United States, Gulf countries, mainly friends of Syria, were acting together, we made many meetings on this, donor conferences. There was somehow a clarity on this. But unfortunately, due to some developments, negative developments, and some tensions between these members of this Syrian Friends group, this issue became a little bit not in the front line among the priority issues now. The priority is now the political solution and the fighting pandemic and phrasing or drafting the Syrian new constitution. But sure, as it is written in the paragraph, Gulf countries must be part of it. On how to deal with Russia on this, there are of course different opinions. For years, Russia is part of the problem there and somehow part of the solution there. But at the end, the final solution will be found in Geneva with the participation of broader international community. Most of them are members of our allies. On the question of the Greek colleague, I should emphasize that Turkey is bordering Syria with almost 900 kilometers, more than 900 kilometers borderline. And Turkey is hosting more than 4 million refugees for almost now 9 years. Turkey made a lot of sacrifices for both harboring refugees, supporting them within Turkey and within Syria. And Turkey was very patient during all these years. Only after the intervention of Russia within Syria heavily, and after the mutual actions by the United States and TYD-YPG, which are affiliate of the PKK terrorist organization, Turkey felt obliged to enter there to protect its own border security, and if possible, to somehow facilitate a political solution which is long overdue. You cannot compare Turkey with any other country on the Syrian crisis, Syrian issue. And I should remind that because of the security concerns, I remember thankfully that some allies were with us on the borderline with their Patriot anti-ballistic missiles and with some other capabilities. It implies the nature of the problem and the concerns of Turkey. With regard to the questions and comments of our chairman of the Turkish delegation, Osman Aşkınbak, why did the war in Yemen become so brutal? Why did it get worse and worse year by year? This is the nature of the question, I think. As everybody remembers, at the beginning of escalation of the conflict within Yemen, everybody blamed Iran for irresponsible intervention. This was right. But later, unfortunately, the coalition forces started using very excessive force without bringing any initiative for a political solution, for an peaceful exit. Especially United Arab Emirates was somehow rogue, irresponsible on its actions. It complicated very much the conflict, and it hampered the opportunities for a solution. And so it got worse and worse. Unfortunately, international community in general was not sensitive enough to face this, and somehow Yemen seems to be forgotten. As Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, before jumping into politics, I participated in many meetings on Yemen at that time with an Islamic cooperation organization and with other groups, attended also by the UN representatives. Unfortunately, the international community couldn't get focused united on the nature of action to stop this. Also, although it is the worst humanitarian tragedy in recent times. On Khashoggi issue, I inserted this in my report, Mr. Chairman, because when this happened, when this became public, we were in a NATO meeting in a country I don't remember. We were listening to news, all members of NATO, and everybody was horrified. What happened? How happened? And about the lies by the Saudi rulers at that time, no, same one. But unfortunately, later the reactions, the condemnations were not improper, were not commensurate to the nature of this tragedy. What happened? That's why I inserted this in the report, because I believe that it reflects the feelings of everybody in the NATO. On Syria, of course, as now due to pandemic, I should say due to or thanks to, I don't know, somehow armed conflicts decreased. But the problem is there. Unfortunately, Assad regime, still supported, backed by Russia and Iran, does not commit itself to a political transition, to a political solution. But thanks to the Turkish presence there, in 3 parts in the northern Syria, all are in the Turkish borders, there is a balance. And thanks to Turkish presence also, we have the opportunity to protect millions who fled from the regime forces within these territories on the Syrian side of the border. I served in Syria twice during Bashar Assad time. I still believe that if friends of Syria, the broad international community doesn't get united on the response, Assad regime will wait until they think it is right time again to attack. Mr. Chairman, 5 years ago, when Russia was still not there, didn't come, if we could get united on a limited action in Syria, we could abort escalation of this conflict to this dimension, to this tragedy. Unfortunately, many countries, I was present in many meetings, most of these countries are a member of the allies. Most of them were hesitant. The most relevant question in their answers for Turkish initiatives to establish a safe zone, no-fly zone, to prevent further escalation, their response was, we couldn't protect Srebrenica, now who will protect our safe zone, our no-fly zone? Then this was not a proper attitude at that time. Unfortunately, we are there. Let's hope that we can get a more closer attitude in coming times on the solution in Syria. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Once again, my thank you and our French colleague for the quality of the reports and the presentation. There's an item on our agenda, any other business, but I rather fancy that since we've reached 1600 hours by UK time, and since we've had a lengthy discussion on relevant matters, then I needn't trouble the meeting with any other item of business. Close for me, therefore, to tell you the date and place of the next meeting.
Sorry, sir, there is actually a request from Ms. Chanaku and a request from Mr. Ildiz. sorry, that request is now gone. There's a request for Mr. Formentini from Italy as well, on any other business.
Well, do we know what the requests relate to?
No, sorry, no way to know.
Right, well, can I make it clear that if we're taking any other business, it should not involve going back over issues which we've discussed in the two reports. Can you just remind me who the first person who sought
So
that?
the first person to request the floor is Ms. Giannakou from Greece, and then there's Mr. Formentini from Italy.
Right, well, we'll take Ms. Giannakou from Greece, first of all.
Actually, she's just cancelled her request, so now
right.
it's Mr. Formentini from Italy.
Mr. Formentini from Italy?
Do you hear me? It's on the second report, if I can, if I may.
Well,
short.
But you will have to be very, very short, because it is now after our closing time.
Yeah, just my point of view on the Abraham agreement between Israel and the Emirates. According to me, it's an historical agreement, something that will change the landscape, geopolitically speaking, in the Middle East. And we will have to analyze it objectively. Thank you.
Okay, that is very welcome brevity. Thank you very much. Is that it, Nathan?
This is it.
Very good. Okay. Well, I was moving on to tell you that the next meeting...
Actually, sorry, this is not it. There is again a request from Ms. Giannakou from Greece. Sorry to interrupt you. Do you want to take it?
Yes, but again, briefly, please.
The Assembly has to say before 9 September if they come or not, in order to arrange the system of the meeting.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that point.
I say that before 9 September, the members of the Assembly, they have to say if they come to the meeting of Athens or not, in order to arrange the system of sitting and the program of the meeting.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's a good reminder. Thank you. I was going to mention that. Our next meeting is scheduled to take place on the 21st and 22nd of November at our annual session in Athens. And our Greek hosts, the International Secretariat of the Assembly and the Standing Committee, are monitoring the situation closely and will seek to notify delegations as soon as possible if plans are going to change. I very much look forward to seeing you in November, particularly in person. But of course, we live in very uncertain times, but we'd all very much like to fulfill the invitation made by our Greek colleagues. That concludes this meeting of the Political Committee. May I thank all of you for your attendance and for the thoughtful participation of those who've made observations, and indeed, on behalf of the entire committee, to express our thanks to the interpreters who, as ever, do a wonderful job in challenging conditions, which allows us always to communicate so effectively. I'd also like to thank the committee directors, Andreas Avisius and Nathan Greason, and the committee coordinators, Karen Walker-Love and Sarah Filion, who've worked so diligently to make this meeting possible, to our research assistants, as well as to colleagues who are operating the Kudo platform. Before I adjourn the meeting, may I say how sorry I am that I've been in and out of the meeting simply because of technical difficulties. And I'd rather hope that if we have to do this again, then I and those around me can find ways of avoiding such technical interruption. But formally, I now adjourn this meeting of the Political Committee of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly.